Assalamu alaikum students, welcome to another lecture on TEFL, a very important lecture. Do you know which method today we are going to start? Yes, you know, Suggestopedia, very good in fact. So I asked you last time to have a look at that method and you all did that. Good. But before I start this method, and mind you, this is a very important method and very interesting method. I am sure you would like this method the most, right? Because majority, in fact, when you research says that people, in fact, love this method, the teacher love this method, and the student also love this method. So there's a suspense, right? That what happens in this method, why people love this method, what are the good points of the method, and what are the weak points. So if you see that, once you will start this method, you will find that this method has more pros, more good points than the weak points. So we will see what is this method and what does this method talk about, what are the principles of this method, what are the techniques teachers use in the class, and how learners enjoy this method, and particularly how learners in fact achieve their goal of learning a foreign language. So this is the method that today will start, and of course today's lecture and the next lecture we will talk about this method, that is Suggestopedia. So dear students, before that, as usual, what is it? Let's review the last lecture. What was the last lecture, students? Remember? The silent way. Are you silent these days? Alright. So now I ask you for your feedback. How did you find this method? And those of you who are teaching, in fact, so did you try this method in your teaching practices? And if you tried, how was your feedback? I received some feedbacks and the people say, well, it works at times. If the teacher and students are of the view that once you are tired and you feel that now you have taken 4 or 5 classes, and at the end, if you incorporate this method, that is the silent way. And again, I mean the word silent way is there. And why? I mean, generally we avoid calling this silent method. Why? Because the originator of this method, I mean himself, he says that he doesn't call it the method. So that's why we call it the silent way. So the teachers, the practicing teacher, are of the view that once you feel that you are tired and you are at the end of your rope and you have taken your 4 or 5 slots and you feel that now you need a bit relaxation and all you want to relax, so what you need to do, you can use this method. And again, this method works there because you remain silent, and what do you do? That you give chance to your students, and they in fact communicate, they of course listen, they in fact also read, and finally write. So 4 skills are there. So that is the one observation I have received from different students, and particularly those who are teaching English language in fact. So yes, every method has its pros, every method has its cons. Like I told you last week that no method is an ideal method. Every method of foreign language teaching has its pros, gray areas, and of course, well, every method has good points. And again, before starting these methods, I told you students that, well, you see, whatever method we in fact have talked about, or we would talk in this course, it is not hard and fast that you would change your method of foreign language teaching and you altogether incorporate this, altogether replace this method. The point is that what we are talking about these methods, so that we would think over and see that whatever methodology of foreign language teaching, what you are incorporating in the class, how this method can be a value addition. For example, how Suggestopedia can help you improve your foreign language teaching. Similarly, how silent way, for example, or direct method, or you see the oldest method, that is grammar translation method, helps you in fact. So this is what I told you in the very first slide, that well, whatever methods are there, they are just to open your vision, in fact, to broaden your vision, that these are other methodologies that researchers have suggested. In fact, and the point was, because every originator of the method feels that this method is the best and this method has an edge over other methods. So you being, once you use this method, you will practice this method in the class, then you would better tell that either this method works as per the expectation of the originator or not. Because mind you, of course, when the context changes, the background changes, the environment changes, of course, so at time we feel that a method, of course, may not be a success. So only we can find out, we can determine the success of any method once we incorporate this method, once we use this method in practice and see what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages. So that's why we talked about the silent method. And remember that what are the goals of the teacher in the silent method. What is it? Yes, that word, remember, GRICFLCAS and double E. Very good. G stands for goals, R stands for the role of the teacher, and then what? Characteristics, I for interaction, fine, and F for feeling of the students, L for language skills, the culture, fine, and then A for what? Areas, right? S for skills, and N for what? Native language, and then E for error, how the teacher responds to error, and last E, how evaluation is done. So keep this abbreviations in mind, and then you will not forget these 10 questions that should be on your fingertips. And I hope you all have done that. You're all a good student, you all have a career, you all have objective to achieve, so you are putting efforts. I really appreciate you for this. And again, I'll request you to keep on working, in fact, keep on putting efforts so that you may become good teachers of foreign language, particularly English language, right? This is the objective of the course, to help you, what? In teaching this English as a foreign language. Is that clear? So students, yes, in the silent way, what we saw that the teacher remains silent. He speaks only whenever he has to, in fact. So very limited speech is there of the teacher, but what he does, that he makes his learners speak, in fact. And how does he achieve his goal? He achieves his goal by using his gestures, by using his postures, body language, paralanguage, right? So all these, the intonation also he uses, the teacher, to help his learners. So goal is what? Self-expression. The student should be able to express themselves, and this is ultimate the purpose of the language, that if a learner of a foreign language is able to express himself in different situations, right? If he knows different sounds, if he have vocabulary items, of course, and then if he does his job well, so you can say that the goal has achieved. And then of course the role we saw in the last the silent way, the role of a teacher is technician or an engineer. Now you better know what does an electrician do, what does an engineer do, and what does a technician do. So a technician, of course, they play with the tools, in fact, they fix certain things, in fact, they screw certain things. So this is what the teacher do, in fact, in the silent way. You have seen that the teacher speaks very low, I mean even limited in speech. Almost even some researchers say that the teacher's speech in this method is hardly he speaks, in fact. Fine. So that's why he works as a technician or he works as an engineer. So the if you see, they keep that engineer in mind. The engineer, of course, I mean, again, either he is electrical engineer or mechanical engineer or civil engineer. A civil engineer works with of course, civil in infrastructure, the buildings, the bridges and all that. And similarly, electrician, of course, electrical engineer, he works with electrical appliances, for example. And then other mechanical engineers, they work in factories, they work in, cement plants and all that. So is the case here, the teacher. Now you compare a teacher with a technician and with an engineer, and you will realize that the teacher in the silent way, what he does, that he works, his role was as a technician or an engineer. Then we saw the characteristics of this method. In fact, the C, of course, we started with the sounds. Again, the sounds that we know, right? Moving from familiar sounds to unfamiliar sounds. Again, from known to known, from known to unknown. And again, You remember we talked about that, well, the sounds of the language, of course, is a very important feature. The most of the language have these similar sounds. So what we do, we start. Not all sound, my dear students, of course, some sounds in different languages, they are common. So we start with those sounds which are common in L1, and then we move on to L2. Good. And then again, whatever the structures the teacher focuses on. So which structures? Situational based structures, of course. So again, structures are given importance, priority, but which structures? Situational based structures are given, and again, how? Through practice. Then of course interaction is there. I mean, between students interaction is more, and between teacher and a student it is limited, in fact, very limited. Teacher only speaks whenever he has to, or when he feels that there is no way out. So at the last resort, my dear students, the teacher says something as a last resort. First, he tries his best to manage things without speaking, in fact, without oral speech. He tries his best to use his kinesics. What is kinesics? Yes, it's a good question. Kinesics is a technical term for body motion. And again, kinesics is further divided into what? Your postures, your gestures. Now, what are postures? Yes, the way you stand, the way you sit. What are gestures? Yeah, the way you move your body parts. At the gesture example, this is a gesture. A fist, this is a gesture. This is a gesture, right? So, of course, teacher uses different gesture just to help out his students. And then again, feelings. All right, yes, we saw that positively. Feelings are dealt with the student. If a student struggles in pronouncing a sound, so the teacher comes forward, and of course he, through his gestures, he helps him out. And he in fact, how does he help him out? How does he help his teacher? Yeah, he makes that student to correct himself. So self-correction, in fact, the teacher focuses on self-correction of the students. And again, of course, language is there, right? A positive role, of course, we see, and the culture cannot be separated from the language. Which areas of language are, of course, highlighted, emphasized? Yeah, vocabulary is there, but limited, we could say, because we have 500 words that we saw in the class. And then with skills, yeah, almost all 4 skills, in fact, they have given importance. Native language, yes, it is there, in fact, though it's at a very small scale, but native language is used there. Errors, of course, I told you earlier, the self-correction was there by the students. Teacher makes students self-correct, of course, right? Teacher helps the students so that they would correct themselves. And then evaluation, yeah, there is no formal testing, there is no formal examination, there is no formal, testing is there, testing system is there. How does the teacher evaluate? Yeah, the teacher keeps on monitoring, in fact, keeps on seeing the students. When the teacher is silent, also he tries to see that how much has been learned, and of course which sounds the students are struggling, and what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses. So again, the teacher keeps on doing SWOT analysis of the students, in particular this context. Clear, students? So these are the things that we talked about in the last week of silent way. Again, silent way is one of the important methods, some of the important ways of foreign language teaching. Now the point is that you need to think that, well, either if this method works or not, in fact, or whatever method of teaching you are using in your institution, right? And if you incorporate this method, then would it work or not? If altogether you cannot incorporate this method, then which areas, which techniques, which of course that you can incorporate in the class so that your teaching will be more effective, in fact. So if you are yes, for a fresh graduates, for the fresh students, yeah, you should see that on the teacher's part, because you are the future teachers, you are the future in fact TEFL trainers. So how you can use the method, and you may interact with the people who are using this method and find out, right, what are the positive sides of this method and what are the negative sides, and if there are negative sides, why those weaknesses are there, can we overcome them? So these are some questions that you should think over them. Now come back. Which method? Yes, where? Fun learning, playing, games. What else? Peripheral learning, right? What is learning? Peripheral learning. What else? Role plays. What else? I mean, excellent sitting environment, right? You have cushioned, you have sofas, right? And of course there are charts in the class, there are some grammatical patterns on those charts, and there is music in the class, right? So all these things, all fun, all jazz in this class. Which class? Yes. And the method which is given by, yes, Georgi Lozanov, right? So he is the originator of Suggestopedia, and you can see the image of this Georgi Lozanov. So students, let's start this method. Ready for it? Are you enjoying? Yes, you must enjoy it. This is a method to be enjoyed, and I am sure at the end of these 2 lectures you would feel that this method is really good, and of course you can think of in using this method in your classes if you are teachers, practicing teachers, and those of you who are the fresh graduates. Yeah, you will see that of course this method really works, and this method can be a success, right, in the present environment that we are going through. Of course, like if you see the environment these days, of course you will find problems outside, you will find instability outside, you will find chaos outside. So in these circumstances, teaching a foreign language is really a challenge. So my opinion is that in this challenging environment, so Suggestopedia can be a remedy, can be a solution. So if you learn how to use this method, and if you learn what is this method, what are the terms and conditions of this method, what are the principles of this method, what are the techniques of this method, and why, of course, Georgi Lozanov gives this method. So you will be, of course, I'm sure, I'm certain you will try to exploit this method, and you will recommend this method to your teachers if you are the future teachers. And if you are teachers now, you can think of changing your method. Again, we will see at the end that what are its strengths, what are its positive sides. So let's start. There won't be any suspense. So dear students, here is what Suggestopedia. Very simple word, suggestion, right? The verb is suggest, right? And from that you have what? Noun suggestion, right? People also call it suggestion, fine. So from the word suggest, like in Urdu we have what? Tajweez karna. Baat samajh aa gayi hai, right? So this is a method, of course, from the word suggest, and you have Suggestopedia, right? So which method? Suggestopedia. Super learning. Now, why it's a super learning, right? Because you learn in an excellent environment. You learn in an ideal environment where there is no stress on you. Clear? So once there is no stress on you and you learn in an ideal environment, so definitely there's a super learning when there is no stress on you. And even there is no homework, of course, once you go back and you just, sleep and just practice those things, right? That's why it's a super learning, because the classroom environment is excellent and techniques are also very, very, enjoyable. So the students learn, in fact. So that is what the philosophy behind is, that give the learners a free hand, give the learner an environment where they would be happy to learn the language. Clear? So that is, of course, mean the word it's a super learning. So again, the point is, Georgi Lozanov was of the view that psychological barriers are the main causes of the failure. So if I feel that I won't be able to learn, so that would hinder my performance, that would stop me from learning. And again here, being a teacher, my dear students, we must motivate our students. Again, motivation. That if in the very first class, if you say that you cannot learn a foreign language, or you cannot learn the language, so again it would demotivate the students. But in the very first class, if you tell the students, well, students, you are here and you'll be learning this language and you will learn. And that's what we see in the class, in the proceeding. I hope you have read that chapter. So the point is that this is what that we have to remove any psychological barriers, right, that students may have, in fact, once they join your class. So if you are using this method already, or if you want to use this method, Suggestopedia says that, well, you see, help the students, in fact, remove their psychological barriers. So these barriers must be removed. How? By telling them, well, today you are here and you will be learning this language, you will be speaking this language, and again, I mean, without putting any efforts. Because these days, of course, whenever we have to do something, so it becomes difficult for us that when you put efforts, for example, so if you work hard and then you get stressed, it's a natural thing. But the point is, here you learn, right? At the same time, you enjoy. So it's a fun learning, right? Which learning? Fun learning. Then when the students, I mean, learned, in fact, the language in an ideal environment, in a suitable environment where things are, of course, very, very positive. So that's why the point you should keep in mind that we being TEFL teachers, first of all, if we are following the method, so we need to remove those psychological barriers from the students. We need to encourage the students that you have potential and you'll be learning, and you will learn without putting much efforts. So this is again another image that what's going on. For example, there is a balloon, the people are playing, and there is fun in the class. So again, I hope you have an idea that this learning is very what? Yeah, again, you can say it's a meaningful learning because the students do not take any stress, right? So in this way they learn. So again, this word, my dear students, SUG is an abbreviation for Suggestopedia. So what are these mean? These barriers are what? Fear of bad performance, limited ability to learn, and failure. So our full mental powers are not revealed, right? If your environment, if your mentor, if your teacher does not motivate you, right, for the learning, and if the learner has that fear of unknown or fear of failure, so then he won't be able to learn. So these things we have to desuggest. Again, mean desuggest, we have to remove. I mean suggest, give something, but whatever the problems are, psychological barriers are in the mind of the learner, we have to desuggest, we have to remove. Is that clear? No, dehydrate, right? De mean fine, remove, of course. Hydrate, you know that when the blood, of course, water dehydrates from you. So is the case here, mean desuggest. So you have to motivate the learner of this language, and you have to tell him that, well, you can learn, you have potential, and things would be what? Would be fun for you. So that's what and then once you do that, then you will feel that the learner will put his efforts and his learning will be fun learning, in fact. Another, of course, what? You can see that students are visualizing a pseudo state, in fact, where they feel they are sleeping, but in fact they're not sleeping, they're just thinking, in fact. And again, see, it's a relaxed environment. Fine, there's no harm, there's no stick in the hands of the teacher, no danda is there, in fact. And everything is what? It looks as if you are having a party. So it's a party time, fine. So learning is there, but in a party. And you see in the class, of course, you must have seen that, well, that the teacher says, you see, well, today we are going to have a party, we are going to have a fun time. And then he asks the students to close your eyes, and the students imagines in a world, in fact, where language is spoken as the first language. Which language? The target language. So dear students, again mean how to harness and what? Redirect mental capacity for maximum learning. Again, so once you harness, of course, the mind, once you motivate the student of the learners of that target language, so then you can have maximum production. Students will learn in of course in the best possible way, and the learning would be maximum. So that is the important. I mean, that's why, of course, if you are if you are under stress, I mean, if the learner is under stress, and if he feels, I mean, he cannot learn and he has so many problems, and if you do not remove those problems, if you do not motivate that student, so definitely it would be difficult for him to learn that language. So that's what Suggestopedia or Suggestology, in fact, says that, well, that we need to harness, we need to train, we need to to help the learner in such a way that he would give maximum result, or his learning would be maximum. So that's what, of course, this method is based on what? De-suggestion and suggestion, right? I told you, de-suggest means remove the fears, the worries, the problem that the student have. Either there are psychological barriers, so that he would learn more. If you feel, for example, if something is already there in a bag, in a bag, and if you put more things, so things will be overstuffed, in fact. So what the Suggestopedia suggests, that we need to remove the previous things, previous stuff from a bag, and then again we can have more things, we can have more space, so that learning would be maximum learning, in fact. So again, here is an image. You can see that this image shows what is suggestion and what is de-suggestion, or what is Suggestopedia or what is de-Suggestopedia. Clear that? Remove whatever you have once you de-suggest, and then you will be able to learn more, in fact. So dear students, again, what is it? The image you have seen. I hope you have got the message that unloading mental reserves for unwanted memories. This is what de-suggestion. You need to know this definition. And then what is suggestion? What? Loading the reserves with facilitating memories. So again, mind you, the facilitating memories, in fact, the memories that facilitate you. For example, you imagine a profession, you name yourself, of course, you give yourself a new name, a name in the target language, and then you select a profession for you. So again, what? Now you are loading yourself, what? And that loading is what? Facilitation, of course, and that becomes what? You're meaningful, and you don't forget. Retention would be more, in fact. That is what remember that de-suggestion and then suggestion. Yes, students, clear? Should we move on? All right. So now the basics of suggestology. What is it? Authority. In fact, the teacher's CV, his beliefs in the method and his manner are valued. So this is placebo, of course, mean placebo effect. The point is that this environment is important. Teacher, of course, he is important, in fact, but again the point is that how teacher, in fact, manages that class is also important. The student, in fact, yes, because since the teacher in this language, in this method, Suggestopedia, in fact, provides facilities to the students. So that's why, I mean, his instructions are to be followed. I mean, this can be debated, in fact, later on, that either you, support this point or not, but this is what the basic the point is, that the teachers, in fact, the power, authority is important, because the teachers, I mean, we will see, and we saw in the class as well, that the teacher, in fact, of course, helps the students to have their role plays and help the students to have interviews and all that. So that's why the teacher's power is important in suggestology or Suggestopedia. Again, infantilization. Now, from the word infant, and then infantilization. What is that? Students take the role of a child games, in fact, songs, gymnastic exercise, in fact. How does, for example, if you see, you must have seen children acquiring language, in fact. So how children acquire that language, how children, in fact, start speaking, and how children listen to the language, and what do they do, in fact. So that is, again, Suggestopedia says that, of course, mean that it should be that students should take the role of the child, and how children learn, how children acquire. So that is what we call it, infantilization. I mean, like infant-like learning, we can say that. All right. Now moving on, what? Principles, in fact. Before I move to principle, again I go back to the class proceedings. You have read that. So in class proceedings, what happens? It was a class, small class. We have 16 students in the class are there, and then what happens? Yeah, the teacher comes, of course, and then, we see the class environment. Of course, it's a very, very ideal environment. The students sit on cushioned sofas, right? And the teacher enter the class, and of course, what does the teacher do, students? Yeah, of course, right? He says that, well, you won't, that you are here to learn this language, and you will be learning the language. And again, he says, of course, without putting efforts, you will learn the language. And then the teacher, of course, asks them. Teacher gives them, in fact, takes them to a world where where the language is spoken as the first language, where the target language is spoken. So I mean, then again, before taking that, the teacher gives description that now we are here, we have to take a flight, and we will land, in fact we will fly, and we will reach there. And then of course, while giving this description, teacher asks them to close your eyes, in fact, and the students of course close their eyes and they think as if they are flying. Fine. And the description of the teacher is, again, it's a beautiful description. And once the teacher asks them to open your eyes, and they imagine a new world, in fact. So then once they imagine in a new world, now you say you are at the airport, or you are in a new country where the language is spoken. So this is what the point is, that see, so then the teacher of course moves on, of course, that again there are the music in the class, and then of course there is a peripheral learning and all that. So simple different techniques are also used in the class. The point is, yeah, this environment that we have seen in the classes, of course, a very ideal environment. Of course, the strength is not more, and the students sit in a semi-circle and they can face the teacher directly, in fact. So let's see the principles, of course, this of Suggestopedia. Well, learning is facilitated in comfort. This is important, in fact. So comfort level of the student is there. Like we see that if students are not comfortable, so definitely learning would not be healthy, in fact. So a comfortable learning environment is required, is needed, of course, in this method, in this of course Suggestopedia. Again, now you can I mean, we can comment on that, well, if for example, if you see in our country, if we provide this environment to the students, then like generally we say that student doze in the class, because if the class is a comfortable class, and of course the sofa sets are there, cushioning are there, so we feel that the student cannot, I mean, concentrate on the class. So I mean, yeah, it is debatable, right? It has pros and cons if you provide the comfort level to the student. And again, the point is that can we provide that comfort to the students or not? Do we have that enough in infrastructure? Do we have that this kinds of the classroom for language teaching, where our literacy rate is low, and where of course a large number of children, even they are unable to go to school. Fine. Well, students, so that is first principle, is that the learning is facilitated in comfort. Then again, what peripheral learning is valued. Now what is peripheral learning, students? Right, the learning around, we have seen in the class that, well, the students, the class where they sit, we find charts around them, we find different, I mean, the charts, of course, they comprise of grammatical structures are there, the maps are there, again the maps of the country, of course, where they are moving. So all there are different pictures in the class. So peripheral learning is really, of course, a good source of the learning for the students, because once they come in the class and they see around, and of course, and they get that concept, in fact, and there is no teaching. They just see and they absorb that idea, and after a week, of course, the teacher also changes the posters or the charts or the pictures or the dialogues in the class, and also there are some grammatical structures. So fine, when you see some things, then definitely learning would be more of, and you learn, and there is no stress on you that you need to learn those things. So that's why, of course, good institutions, you might have seen that they focus on the peripheral learning, and they in fact give assignments to the students. The students make different charts, and again that encourages the students that they use their art, of course, and finally they decorate the class with different of course real posters, charts, and all that. So peripheral learning is valued in this method, that is Suggestopedia. Then students, well, teacher of course students give respect to the teacher, and again they should value the teacher's authority, because definitely I mean, it is very common that, well, in a method where things are fun, and we have songs, we have the music in the class, and we can play different games and all that. So in this case, in this situation, there need to be somebody who would monitor the situation, and of course that's why the teacher's authority is important for the smooth functioning of the activities in the class. Otherwise there might be chaos, right? So that's why the respect of the teacher and authority of the teacher, right, are important in this method, Suggestopedia. So I mean, it's quite just natural that you see if the students are having fun and you see they are learning fine, but the point is that if there is nobody to in fact guide them, then things would be of course things would be impossible, or things would be difficult for the administration to manage. So that's why the teachers, the role, the teachers in fact respect, and the teacher's power, authority is must in this method. Then the teacher suggests the barriers, in fact, and L2 learning is a fun. Again, whatever the problems are that we discussed earlier, that the teacher does, he desuggests, in fact. He removes whatever the problems that the learners have in their mind regarding their this fear of the learning foreign language. So the teacher removes that, teacher desuggests. In other words, the teacher in fact makes of course the mind of the learner empty, right? That's why once they have an empty mind, and they would come with that enthusiasm that they can learn, and and once they start learning, so again the environment and the peripheral learning and all these of course aspects of the method really help improve their language skills. So that's why the peripheral learning, and again the teacher role is also important. Imagination is activated, of course, suggestion, right? Then just let's suggest in fact you are in America, or of course let's suggest you are in a playground. So again, that is the student's imagination is imagine. That close your eyes and you imagine yourself in a new world. So again, that is what. And again, once they close and the teacher gives a beautiful description, and student feel like doing that activity. If they're in the playground, for example, the teacher says, imagine yourself in a playground and you are playing football. So again, the student imagine that, right? And again, the student teacher says, imagine yourself in a superstore where you are shopping, for example. So again, the point is that student imagine, so then teacher suggests in fact. And here the teacher's beautiful description also helps the learners to imagine things. And again, students' confidence is raised. Once you, of course, give these activities to the learners where they can visualize things, so again this gives confidence to the students, to the learners. And why again, I mean every student gets involved because it's a small class, right? And the teacher can see everybody, and again everybody gets due attention of the teacher. So the principal is students. What is that? That we saw in the class that the teacher asked the students to have their own names, to have the new names, of course, names from the target language, in our case, for example, English language. So, and again, once they choose the new names, and also their what professions. Fine. So choosing new names and biographies in fact enhance feeling of security in fact. And again, dear students, why the teacher in fact asked students to have the new names in the target language. Like you see, because you are the language instructor, and of course you have to be default teacher in future, or other like professions. But the point is that in class it happens sometime that you have classes, for example, from your learner can be from diverse areas. In fact, your learner can be from army, from in fact navy, from air force, from civil services, from different professions. People could be their learner. And sometime in the class it happens that when a senior officer is sitting, and then again a junior is sitting. So again, that there is, of course, a gap between a senior and the junior. So once the teacher asked them to have the new names, then everybody would have new names, and everybody would consider himself the part of the class, and everybody would be everybody would be putting efforts to learn the language. Otherwise, what could happen that while the senior is there and junior might not be able to express himself well in front of his seniors. Generally, example, if in a class when as a colonel is sitting and also there is a major is sitting and both are learning, for example, Hindi language or any other language. So the point is, in the second language, that can create a problem. So that's why to have a better solution of this problem, what can we do? That we, my dear students, we can ask students to have new names, right? And those new names, if you ask them to take a name from the target language, so that would be better. Then again, what happens, another principle is that easy to handle dialogues, right, come first. So this is another point, that of course when there is a dialogue is there, dialogue is the two person, they communicate on a given situation. So yes, because the point is that there is no pressure and things are ideal for the learners and they are not under stress, right? So that's why the dialogue process can be done successfully, in fact. Another principle is, students, what is that, right? Students' attention is off the form. This is very important point, right? The form and the structure, right? So my dear students, of course language has two purposes. If you see the sentence, every sentence or the language, what language has a form and language has what function. Now which is important? Either form is important or the function is important. If I ask you this question, can you? Structure is important, form is important. Okay, you don't know what is form. Yeah, form is what the words, the pattern of a sentence, and function is that, well, what is the purpose of that expression. For example, if I ask you that bring me a glass of water, so now this is what a structure. But what is the function of this sentence? Being a teacher, I can ask you bring a glass of water, but can you do the same for me? Can you ask me to bring a glass of water? So this is what, mind you, the function. So once you would ask, you say please. If you want me to ask, you use a word please as well. Or you can ask, your mother can ask you bring me a glass of water, but you cannot ask, right? You cannot use the same the form to your mother. So bring me a glass of water. Rather you would say please give me a glass of water. So again the point is, yes, this is the form and the function, in fact. So what in this method particularly, that, well, we see that this Suggestopedia in fact highlights the form of the function of the language more than the form of the language. Clear? So keep this in mind, that the function of the language, the purpose, that you have imperative sentences, you have interrogative sentences, you have negative sentences. Again, fine, there's a form. But the point is that what is the function of that sentence. So that's why when you learn language, so you need to know that what is the form and what is in fact the function of that sentence, which context, right? We can use this form, and of course where we can use what is the function of this form. So this is an important point. You need to read more about it, right? You can get information from different sources, that which is more important, the form is important or the function is important. So this the method that is we're talking about, Suggestopedia, what the methods highlights, the method underlines what the function is more important than the form, right? So we need to know, in fact, that's why when we being TEFL instructors, what we try to inculcate this technique, that this language has form and a function, and functions are important, that students should know that which context we can use this form, and then accordingly students can use that. So this is the form and the function. The students' attention is off the form and on the communication, mean the function. Is that clear? Good. So students, if you move on, what is it? The lessons indirectly enhance positive suggestion. Again, this is what that suggestion is there, of course, that again that you see the title of that handout. When the students get that handout, there is the title, of course. So the title also should they convey something, that whatever the handout you give to the students, so there is indirect what? See, there is a positive suggestion is there. Another principle, students, what is it? Principle is what? Yeah, grammar and vocabulary are taught very superficially, in fact, right? Teacher talked about grammar and vocabulary superficially in fact, but he does not dwell on them in fact. He doesn't make it that, well, I mean, of course he spends the whole class on grammar and vocabulary, like generally in our environment you might have seen some people do that. Whenever they of course you give them any assignment for some marking, so the first thing that what people do, that they see your grammar in fact. So, and they forget your purpose of course, and then they forget your other important areas. So grammar is one, but not, doesn't mean. And in this method, what the originator of this method, who is the originator? Georgi in fact. What he feels that, well, students, the vocabulary and grammar are taught but very superficially, right? No, teacher in this method we have seen does not go in depth to talk about grammar and vocabulary. And again, of course, we see the mother tongue MMT in fact, and translation are used to transfer meaning. Yeah, we see that the use of translation is there, and also the mother tongue. Again, here if I ask you a question, that so far we talked about different methods. If you remember, we started with grammar translation method, we talked about direct method, we talked about audiolingual method, we talked about silent way, and now we are talking about this Suggestopedia. Mind you, of course, except for direct method, right, more or less we saw that the teacher in fact makes use of the mother tongue in teaching a foreign language. Yeah, the scale maybe, of course, it is limited, but except for the grammar translation method where the teacher makes use of the mother tongue, but here in other methods there is a use of the mother tongue, but it is at very small level, right? So here also we saw that of course the teacher they use what mother tongue and translation for conveying what the meaning in fact. Then students, again, what is it? That again is a very important point, that communication takes place on two plans in fact, right? So what is it? It's also called dual plannedness. Fine. Now what does it mean? Dual plannedness, or what does it mean on two plans, right? The point is, my dear students, well, that here, well, the language message is what is at the conscious level in fact, right? There are two levels, of course. The consciously you learn the language, and music is the music at the subconscious level. Very simple example, you can see that once you read a novel, or you read any the text in the target language, and there is a music of course in the room, so that music is in your subconscious in fact, right? And then again, if your conscious level and subconscious level in fact they come, of course, help each other, then that learning would be more useful. That's what we saw in this principle, is that, well, on one hand, what happens in this method, that, well, language of course messages the conscious level, and second is what happens, that music of course in the class environment in the class is at the subconscious level, and they go together, and of course decoration of the environment is so important. Is that clear? So at the conscious level and at the subconscious level, in simple words, maybe of course you are confused, that whatever the dialogue you are practicing, whatever activity you are doing in the class, either it's a role play or any other activity, or you are playing a game, of course, to learn the language, but at the backhand there is a music. Like we saw in the environment of the class, that there are dim lights in the class. So that, these things definitely they help you learn the language well, right? So that's why, of course, if your environment of the class is ideal, so definitely your production, your output would also be, by ideal mean, your learning would be better in fact. So that's why the communication takes place at two levels, and we also call it dual plannedness. You can read your text as well. So another principle, students, what is that? To overcome the barriers, a pseudo passive state is needed. Like we saw that students sleep in the class, so that is a pseudo state in fact. They are not sleeping actually. Pseudo means jhutha in fact, right? They just pretend. Fine. We saw students are doing this. Yeah. So what is it? They close their eyes. So this is what is going on. That, well, but the point is why so that they would overcome their barriers. So you make them imagine, you make them visualize all that. Then homework is done at night and in the evening. Yeah, there are of course generally, in fact, the ideal times are there. Sometimes the homework is very and even sometimes in Suggestopedia, of course, the teachers, some say, well, if you don't give homework, but some teachers are of the view you can give the homework. And when, of course, when do we do homework? At night or in the morning. In fact, again, the morning time is ideal for doing your work. At night, yeah, what Suggestopedia suggests, it's up to you whether at night you can do your homework or not. And then again we saw dramatization and fantasy. In fact, again, these things what reduce the barriers and they enhance learning, in fact. So again, the art, the music, the drama should be the part of the process of the learning. So again, these things, in simple words, that if you have a music in the class, if there's a drama in the class, there are activities, there is fun, fine, people are happy, there is no stress, mentally learners are ready to learn, and they are not worried for anything, right? And the point is that in their mind there is no fear. So yeah, the point is that learning would be fun and learning would be meaningful. And again, in this way, learner would learn the language faster, right? If you see that, of course, in this way, the learning, why? Because there is no stress on the learner's part, and environment definitely, in fact, what a good environment plays its role, right? Like if there is a poor environment, so you cannot learn in the poor environment. But in this way, right, in this the method, we see that the focus also is on the classroom environment. So a good environment, an ideal environment, definitely, in fact, increases this of course the process of learning a foreign language. So this is another principle is, my dear students, novelty is the novelty is for the, yes, see, to motivate the students, in fact. So what is novelty, by the way? New things, in fact, right? Learning activities are varied. Like you saw in the first one that, well, the teacher asked them to imagine in a new world, and then teacher asked them to have their new names, and then you saw that the teacher asked them to have their own professions also. So what is it? Right, and then again the teacher, of course, uses different games. I am Alex, I am from America and all that. So what is it? See, with A, and then I am the bean, and of course I like banana and all that. So what is it? So again, there are different, the games are there, of course, different songs. So this is novelty, in fact, right? So novelty in the class, again, novelty removes boredom, right? Novelty, in fact, makes students active. And novelty, of course, prepares students for different situations. So again, and when there is novelty in the class, students, in fact, learn the language faster. Like generally, of course, you might have seen, if there is a class going on, and of course the teacher uses lecture method in the class, and every day he uses the same method, there is no change in the activities, right? He uses one activity every day. So students get bored, in fact, and you might have seen that some students they in fact leave that class. So the point is, if there would be novelty in the class, they would be even, for example, changing the sitting environment also, again motivate the students. So and again changing their sitting position also, changing the peripheral environment. Yeah, so all these things being novelty in the class. Then again, we talked about earlier that infantilization is the key factor. A childlike attitude to learning helps a lot. Again, it's a very important concept. What is infantilization, my dear students? That you see, how does a child acquire a language? So child, makes mistakes, right? Child never gets hurt when he makes mistakes. So of course, from one word, and then a child, of course, starts speaking a full sentence. So the point is that he has no fear. The child has no fear, in fact. So he takes it as a fun. He listens to people. He plays, in fact, right? He plays with his siblings and with his toys, and he talks and he learns, in fact, right? So for a child also, it's a fun learning, and the child doesn't know that he is learning that language, in fact, right? So there is no pressure on him if he doesn't learn. So is the case here. Infantilization is an important principle of what? Suggestopedia. Then in some activities, of course, the conscious attention focuses on using L2, not on the structure and form. Like we talked about earlier, we had a good discussion on it, that see, in some activities, the conscious attention focuses on using L2, not on the structure and form. Clear? So again mean that the learner should be able to use simple L2, in fact. Again, in this earlier we discussed that of course function is more important than the form, but in some situations, you see, then the use of the language, right? Again, irrespective of the form and the function, just the learner should be able to use that language. And again, it's a learning. Once he would start using that language, so definitely we would be able to realize, of course, the importance of form and function as well. And then errors are tolerated. For example, we saw that students say how you, right, instead of how are you, and say how you, in fact. So again, the teacher, here does not correct him there, and then he lets the student say. At the end, of course, the teacher also gives him the correct structure. So errors are tolerated and, of course, corrected indirectly later. Clear, students? Fine. All right. So this was today's lecture, the first lecture on which method? Suggestopedia, right? So from the word suggestion, and then de-suggestion. So what do we do? From the word suggest means tajweez, in fact. So Suggestopedia. Who gave this method? Georgi Lozanov, right? So he is the originator of this method for foreign language teaching. So what does this method talk about? Yeah, let's see the summary of this method, my dear students. Here, in fact, that the method of this summary. Can I ask you to give me a summary of this? It's a very good method, in fact, a fun learning method. All right, try. Yes, Muqeed, can you try it? Okay, good. Method talks about suggestion, fine. Also de-suggestion, fine. Good, students. So I hope you have an idea of this method, Suggestopedia, or also suggestology. So students, towards the end, what do we have? That is, in this method, the basic concepts are what? Suggestion, right? You suggest. And what do you suggest, by the way? In fact, this is the point. That's why, and before you suggest something, you have to de-suggest, right? And again, how you suggest? Through peripheral learning, you suggest, you peripheral, the posters, through, in fact, charts, through activities, right? So through imagination, through visualization, right? So through different fun loving activities, through music, through songs, right? What you do? You, in fact, you suggesting, in fact, and the purpose definitely is to learn that the foreign language, to be able to communicate in that language. But again, this learning is done in a way that the learners do not realize it. They do not, in fact, find it that as if something is going on. So again, for this method, maybe if you feel, if you try this method, for adult learners, this method can work well, because adult learners definitely they need, a comfortable environment to sit where they can learn the language. So that's first is suggestion and de-suggestion. So dear students, the basic concept, what authority of the teacher is important. Again, it's a common sense that why teacher's authority is required in this method. You know that we do a lot of activities, teach students, in fact, they can communicate, they have a lot to do in the class, they have fun, they have games and all. So there should be somebody who would manage them, who would, yes, I would say who would lead them, right? So, and that's why, I mean, again, the students are required to accept the power of the teacher, and students are required to respect him. So again, that is the point, of course, that authority and infantilization. A child like learning a language, of course, like a child, when child learns, so he never gets hurt. He learns, and he learns it as a fun. And then again, the comfort, of course, we see the environment of the class is a comfortable environment. Students sit on sofas and all that, and they really enjoy it. Peripheral learning is there. What is peripheral learning, students? Yeah, that environment, of course. No, periphery, there is a circle, so peripheral part of the circle means around. So in the class, we see there are the posters, there are the charts, and believe me, the peripheral learning is very important element of this method, and this really works, and I feel it works at all levels. In fact, of course, even you used to start from grade 1 and go on, right? And this peripheral learning, and whatever subject you teach, my dear students, so this peripheral learning, in fact, helps the learner to learn the concept indirectly, either the concept or to learn that grammatical item, to learn that vocabulary item indirectly. So peripheral learning is important. Then again, teacher de-suggests the barriers and make learning fun, right? Whatever the fears that the teacher might have, so the students may have, so he tries his best to de-suggest, right, to remove those fears, to the barriers that the student have. And again, motivation of the student is very important. So inner motivation of the student is a must for fun learning, for successful learning, in fact. And then student must respect the teacher. Again, it's important, because unless the student give respect, then this class proceeding would be questionable, right? So that's why, to have an ideal proceeding of the class, dear students, so the teacher's respect and the power, of course, should be accepted. And then again, the mother tongue, of course, empty and translation are used to communicate meanings. Yes, you're right. I mean, like I told you earlier, that in this method, in other methods, of course, we saw this use of empty, but it is at a very small level, just to give directions, or to convey some at times the meanings, in fact. But in grammar translation method, we saw that, you see, the more use of mother tongue was there, and also translation. Then errors are what? Tolerated and corrected indirectly, in fact. So dear students, this was of course this lecture number 11, where we talked about briefly about Suggestopedia, and the point that you keep in mind that it is, of course, one of the best methods for foreign language the teaching, particularly. And the method talks about what, that you need to remove the worries of the students. You need to remove the psychological barriers of the students, so that they would be able to learn this language well. So once you remove all those worries, then things would be easy for you, and the learner learns in an ideal environment. So we won't call it a utopian world, but it is an environment where the learner feels at ease, and he learns things well. So that's all with today's lecture. We will see, inshallah, in the next lecture, where we'll talk about more on these this method, right? And we will review what are the principles of this the method, and what are the techniques that can be used in this method. I can also show you some visuals. So thank you very much, and see you in the next lecture. Take care. Goodbye.